So there's been a simple betting and trading strategy that's worked really well on football this year. And the interesting thing about it is it's a good demonstration of taking some theory and putting it into practice, because I actually did a video explaining what I thought was going to happen this season and what you should do about it. And the interesting thing about that video is it has come to pass. The stuff that I talked about there is translated directly into a profitable betting or trading strategy. So what we're going to explore in this video is exactly what I predicted, what's happened, how that's influenced the markets, and how it's been profitable, but also, what happens next. So if you want to learn all about that, then just watch the rest of this video. So there was a big rule change that occurred this year in domestic football, and that was for referees to add on any time wasted to the end of each individual half. And the net effect of that would be to increase the length of the match. Now, upon seeing this, I actually did a video to explain what I thought was going to happen within the markets and the impact that that would likely have on each of the individual football betting markets. But of course, my job is to do this for real. So I immediately started betting on my judgment and doing that for the matches that we saw at the beginning of the season. And in this video, I can talk to you about exactly what has happened in the time in between, because I have now bet on about 1,300 matches so far this season across a variety of markets. And the way that I've done that and the impact of this particular rule change has had a significant effect. So let's explore what effect that it has had. So pretty much as predicted, we have seen more goals this year, and the average number of goals scored per match is currently quite high and is much higher than we would typically expect. And that's perfectly logical. There's more time in a match, more goals are going to be scored, and that's had a direct impact on the over 2.5 goal markets and the under 2.5 goal markets. I've traditionally preferred trading under 2.5 goals, but based upon the fact that I was expecting more goals this season, it just makes more sense to go for over 2.5 goals. We'll talk more about the difference between betting and trading in a second. But there are more goals, and over 2.5 goals is coming in much more frequently than the market is suggesting. Now, more goals tends to influence the match odds outcome a little bit as well, because the chance of a draw actually decreases when we get more goals within a match. And that is because if we had 2 goals, they'd be evenly shared. But if we get 3 goals or 5 goals, you can't share them out equally, if you understand where I'm coming from here. So as a consequence, the likelihood of match ending in a draw tends to tail off a little bit. But the biggest impact is when we go into the correct score market, because the correct score market will obviously, as the name suggests, be influenced by the number of goals and the score of the match. So it's worth exploring that in a little bit more detail to give you an understanding of exactly what has happened this season and why. So at this point, I'd like to make an important distinction between betting and trading, because let's say I have £100 on something at 10 to 1. I win £1,000. But of course, the betting exchange that I'm using will take a commission from there. So if I pay 5% on £1,000, I lose 50 of that 1,000. But that win is a multiple of my stake. Now, when I'm trading, I don't have to do that. I would only actually pay a commission on the profit that I make. So if I have a betting strategy that's at break even, or has a small, tiny amount of margin within it, a tiny edge, then I can almost certainly trade that profitably. And that is because we're trading the price movement, the difference in price. We're getting in and out of the market and doing stuff like that, and we only pay a profit on our fully hedged, only pay commission on our fully hedged profit. So even if you have a betting strategy that isn't like fantastically profitable, it's very likely you could actually have a profitable trading strategy. So it's important to realize that. And when we look at, for example, a correct score market here, if you do want to bet rather than do any form of trading on it, then if you actually Dutch a range of those correct score odds, then that will be much more effective than a traditional bet as well, because again, you're only going to pay commission on a part of the market, not an outright bet, as it were. So it's really important to understand that. And this is why I look at all of these statistics, because I know if I can find something that has a small edge, then I'm very, very likely to be able to trade it profitably, even if I can't bet it profitably after commission. So yeah, that's something really important to understand that I wanted to get across on this video as well. So one of the markets that's bound to be affected by this change is the correct score market. And you can start at a very, very base level. You can sort of say, well, if there are more goals within the market, then it's probably likely that 0-0 is going to be mispriced. And that's pretty much what we've seen so far this season. However, what we have learnt the most is basically where these mispricings have occurred most commonly. And because there are more goals within the market, it seems that the correct score market has generally got the bigger scores wrong. So in matches that are won by 1 goal, the market seems to be fairly accurate. What I'll do is I'll bring up a spreadsheet here of the data that I've seen so far from betting on over 1,000 matches. And this is showing you where the major deviations are within the market.
Across the top, we've got the score of the away team, and down the side, we've got the score of the home team.
And those numbers that you can see in the middle are basically the variation to what we would expect. So, you know, if it's positive and it's a deep green, those are the hot spots within the market. I've chosen green for a color, obviously. And these are basically telling you how much more these are occurring against what the odds are suggesting, and vice versa. But what you can see on here is when we get score lines of 1-3 or 3-0, where a team wins by 2 goals or more, those are the ones that seem to be occurring the most. And those are where most of the opportunities are within the market. So you could bet or trade on these individually, or perhaps from a betting perspective, what you could actually do, you could actually Dutch some of these. So you could basically back 1 or more runner. If you want to learn all about Dutching, I have done videos on that. And of course, if you go into BetAngel, you can actually, there's a fantastic Dutching tool that will do all sorts of weird and wonderful and clever things that will allow you to capture some of that particular value. But fundamentally speaking, when we look at the large number of goals that are occurring above what we would typically expect, they seem to be favouring teams that are likely to score more goals anyway. When you look at matches that are a little bit tighter and closer together, then we would find that the variation isn't too much there. But when we look at those parts of the market where teams are a little bit stronger, where they're likely to score more goals and they're scoring even more because of this change, that's where a lot of the value is. And also bear in mind that the graphic that I put up was in general across all of the markets. It doesn't reflect the individual matches that I've bet on. I'm more interested in what's happening generally, and then I will narrow in and focus on certain markets and matches within there, because as I've always said, you know, for every market there's a strategy, and every strategy a market. If you apply something broadly and blankly, it can work as it is at the moment, but it would be much more effective if you home in on certain matches. And of course, if you look at the predicted goals within BetAngel, that will allow you to point yourself directly at the markets where more goals are going to be likely to be scored anyhow. And at worst, all you can do is look at the bottom of that list and go, well, there are very few goals down here, so I'm just not going to touch those matches at all. But yeah, the correct score market is where most of the variation has occurred that we've seen so far this season. So at the start of this season, because I was expecting more goals, I started to take positions based upon that. I've bet on about 1,300 matches now. It's been very profitable so far this season. But you would expect over time that some of this information gets discounted into the market. But as I mentioned in this video, if you trade rather than bet, even if you've got a slight edge, you can still do something profitable from a trading perspective, even if you can't on a betting perspective. And even if you just do something like lay 0-0, because there are a large number of goals, that's very likely to be mispriced. But it's more likely that you will actually end up finding more opportunities, as I've discussed already, with matches that are likely to have stronger teams who are likely to score more goals, and therefore those elements of the correct score market tend to be mispriced the most. Anyhow, there's a few opportunities for you there. I hope that this video has been useful for you.